10 signs the American dream is collapsing for Black immigrants. You won't believe how the American dream is quietly slipping away from Black immigrants. Welcome to BLK Lens, and in today's video, we're diving into something the mainstream rarely talks about, but that thousands live through every single day. 10 signs the American dream is collapsing for Black immigrants. From being detained for weeks without clear cause, to asylum applications denied with little explanation. From consistently lower wages to the looming threat of job loss just because of skin tone or accent, these aren't isolated incidents. This is what's happening right now, in the very land many believed would offer a fresh start. If you're a Black immigrant or you know someone walking this path full of hope but also full of silent battles, then this video is for you. We're not just retelling stories. We're helping you see deeper, prepare smarter, and speak out when it matters most. So sit back, take a deep breath, and get ready to face the truths not everyone is willing to say out loud. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a story worth hearing. 1. Disproportionate and prolonged detention. There are rooms with no windows, no natural light, where time seems to get stuck in an invisible loop. Some call them detention centers. But for many Black immigrants, they feel more like punishment without a sentence, a nameless penalty that drags on quietly, wearing down the body and fraying the mind. The truth is, immigrants from African and Caribbean backgrounds are being held in ICE detention for nearly 3 months on average, far longer than the general population. Haitian detainees often pass the 100-day mark with ease. Not because they commit more violations, but because the color they carry through checkpoints and border booths gets caught in a gaze that holds them back from the moment they arrive. Many Black immigrants say they're detained longer, not due to paperwork issues, but because they're labeled a risk. A short word, but one that extends confinement, delays reunions, and slowly erodes hope. It's not uncommon to find solitary confinement as the only place they can look up during the day. 4 sealed walls, lit by a cold fluorescent hum. Often, they're placed there not for violence, but for complaining too often about headaches, insomnia, or simply feeling too sad. And instead of mental health support, they're locked away. As if sadness itself were a crime. The system doesn't need to announce its bias, it just runs on silent mechanics. A silence long enough can make the absurd start to feel normal, like someone being held for 80 days due to a mix-up in interview scheduling, or another missing their daughter's graduation because they're detained 500 miles from home. People often say the American dream starts at the border. But for many Black immigrants, that's where the dream gets interrupted for the first time. Not with guns or barbed wire, but with forms, waiting lists, and skeptical stares. The kinds of things no one writes down, yet somehow chip away at you day after day. This reality isn't exposed by a big camera crew. It comes out through the fragile words of those living it. Words that may get swallowed, but still manage to leave an echo on the conscience of a community. Because when prolonged detention stops being the exception and starts becoming the rule, maybe it's not the immigrant who needs to be examined, but the very system that holds them. 2. Criminalization, leading to deportation. There are actions that, if you're white, might be seen as a mistake. But if you're Black and undocumented, they can become grounds for deportation. A rushed nod in an interrogation room, a tiny error on a criminal record form, or something as small as a broken taillight, each can open the door to a one-way flight home. Not because the offense is grave, but because the law is built to see Black immigrants as potential threats, and the system moves quickly to eliminate those threats. In reality, Black immigrants make up less than 6% of the undocumented population, but account for over 20% of deportations tied to criminal records. That number doesn't reflect the severity of offenses. It reflects how their image is handled in the legal gaze, magnified, sharpened, and circled in red. Laws like the 1996 IRA massively expanded the range of deportable offenses, even for long-term residents with roots and families. Programs like 287G and Secure Communities allow local police to pass biometric data to ICE, meaning even the smallest encounter with law enforcement can spiral into an immigration nightmare. Many Black immigrants say they've watched friends and family disappear over trivial charges, a bit of marijuana as a teen, a fight at a bus stop, or simply agreeing to a plea deal they didn't fully understand. It's not rare to hear about a Jamaican immigrant detained for minor drug possession only to lose his job, his custody rights, and eventually, his place in the only country he's called home. This reality doesn't scream through words like security or justice. It flickers in the blank stares of the deported people who thought they were building a life, only to find they were living inside a game where they never got to write the rules. The American dream promises opportunity and redemption. But here, a single misplaced comma on a form can end it all. And when the law operates like a trap disguised in legal language, Black immigrants are almost always the first ones caught in its web. 3. Elevated asylum denial rates. Sometimes people speak of fear in a flat, steady voice, not because they're numb, but because they've moved past the point of proving they're afraid. But in immigration court, where everything is measured by credibility, that silence is often misread as deception. And so, asylum is denied not for lack of danger, but because their fear doesn't sound the way the system expects fear to sound. It's not uncommon for Haitians or Cameroonians to walk into an interview bearing the weight of war, violence, and exile, only to walk out with a rejection notice. The data tells part of the story. In 2023, over 80% of Haitian asylum claims were denied, and nearly 70% for Cameroonians, far above the global average. But these numbers are just the surface. What lies beneath is a quiet reality that Black pain often needs to be proven harder before it's believed. Many Black immigrants share that they're not just asked to recount survival, but to perform it shaped in the victim narrative that officers are used to hearing. If they speak too confidently, they're seen as suspicious. If their stories are disjointed, they're called inconsistent. One Cameroonian applicant once said, "I didn't know what kind of crying would convince them I had been tortured." In reality, most Black asylum seekers face these hearings without legal counsel. And without someone to help interpret forms, verify evidence, or challenge assumptions, the entire process turns into a silent lottery stacked against them. Judges have been documented showing skepticism at the mere mention of certain nationalities, like simply being Haitian means you have to carry the burden of proving an entire country's collapse, even when the facts are there in every human rights report. People often say America is a place of refuge, a last harbor for those pushed from their homes to find safety and hope. But when that hope is measured by time limits, emotional performances, and checklists of what sounds believable, then asylum seekers aren't just fleeing danger. They're running through a maze of expectations no one ever taught them how to navigate. 4. Persistent income disadvantage. Some dreams are painted in the colors of college degrees, global work experience, and the determination to start over across an ocean. But the ones carrying those dreams often find themselves standing in line for janitorial jobs or rushing late-night delivery routes through a city that doesn't even know their name. Not because they lack ability, but because their ability is either dismissed or quietly ignored. Many Black immigrants share that they once believed education and experience would be their ticket to a fair shot in the American job market. But reality tells a different story. They are routinely channeled into low-wage, unstable sectors where diplomas mean little, and survival often hinges on staying quiet and enduring. A mechanical engineer from Ghana may be behind the wheel for a food delivery app. A Nigerian doctor might be changing bedpans in a nursing home, despite once running their own clinic back home. It's not rare to find highly educated Black immigrants earning far less than their peers from other immigrant backgrounds. Even with a college degree, they're often paid below their white, Asian, or South American counterparts. The question is no longer, are they qualified, but are they even seen? In truth, the lack of access to professional networks and mentorship has locked many Black immigrants out of high-income industries. While other groups often enter through a web of connections and referrals, Black workers are left to start from zero in a marketplace where no one has time to wait for them to prove their worth. Many describe being rejected without a word. No callbacks, no follow-ups, just silence. Discrimination doesn't always announce itself. It hides in how fast a door closes and in who's never even invited inside. That kind of silence doesn't shout, but it's loud enough to make someone question their own value. So despite the credentials, despite the talent, they remain on the outskirts of the American dream, where paychecks don't reflect potential, but the place the system has already decided they belong. 5. Workplace discrimination. There are hands that clean boardrooms every night, names never spoken. People who serve lunch amid the noise of busy offices, yet are never invited to a single performance review. And workers who arrive early and stay late, only to be left off every promotion list. Not because they didn't try hard enough, but because their place seems to have been quietly decided long ago, always present, never truly seen. Many Black immigrants share the feeling of being held in place by their own jobs, visible as workers but invisible as members of the team. In practice, they're often called in for roles that fit a silent mold: janitors, waitstaff, warehouse helpers. When they apply for office positions, the silence that follows feels rehearsed. Not because their resume is weak, but because their name doesn't match the image employers are already looking for. It's not rare to hear of a Black immigrant who's been working in a restaurant for over 5 years, yet earns less than a new hire with less experience. They know it, but saying something feels risky, because speaking up could mean being replaced by the end of the week. The reality is, in industries like hospitality, food processing, or in-home care, Black immigrant workers are squeezed on both ends, underpaid and overworked. Some reports have even documented cases where workers earned less than $3 a day in 21st century America. Many have heard the story of a group of Black workers forced to live in filthy conditions, beaten and exploited for decades. But few ask how something like that went on for so long. The answer isn't about a lack of laws, it's about a lack of attention. No one looked closely enough to see they were being treated like shadows in the economic machine. And while industries continue to rely on Black labor as a cheap, replaceable force, the distance between wages, opportunity, and safety keeps growing wider. Black immigrants aren't lacking in skill, they're lacking spaces where their work is valued as contribution, not just assumed labor. 6. Barriers to quality health care. There are pains no one sees, not because they're mild, but because the people carrying them have learned to stay silent. No crying, no pleading. Just enduring, because for many, the fear of walking into a hospital in a country that barely knows your name can be more terrifying than the pain itself. For many Black immigrants, a clinic doesn't feel like a place of healing. It feels like a place where problems begin. A misdiagnosis, a strange question, a signature misunderstood, any of it could pull them into systems they don't know how to navigate. In reality, countless Black immigrants live without health insurance or with coverage too limited to meet their needs. It's not uncommon for them to delay care until the pain becomes unbearable. Each hospital visit doesn't just come with financial anxiety, it comes with the fear of being flagged, of having their immigration status questioned, or being quietly turned away by a receptionist's cold stare. Many share that even after living in the U.S. for years, they still don't fully understand how the healthcare system works, and the system makes no real effort to help them understand. There's no mother tongue support, no doctors who understand the culture they come from, no one explaining confusing procedures in a voice that makes them feel seen. It creates an invisible wall between them and the right to decent care. It's not uncommon to hear Somali, Ghanaian, or Haitian immigrants say they feel they have to brace themselves before entering a clinic, not because of the illness, but because of suspicion. Some skip prenatal care, some avoid checkups altogether, simply because they don't know if using those services might label them a public charge in an immigration file. Even though certain rules have been softened, the fear that accessing care means risking deportation hasn't gone away. It lingers like a shadow behind every appointment. And so the small pains grow into chronic illnesses. The quiet fears evolve into mental distress. When health becomes something you have to negotiate or gamble with, the dream of a safe, stable life starts to feel fragile in ways you can't always explain. 7. Housing instability and segregation. There are neighborhoods where, just by walking through, you can already tell who's allowed to live there and who isn't. No signs, no fences. Just rents kept low enough and inconveniences kept high enough to quietly say, this is where the dream doesn't stop, because it never even passes through. That's how many Black immigrants find themselves invited to stay in corners of the city designed to hold people in place, not help them rise. The truth is, finding decent housing in America isn't just about money, it's about position on a map where not everyone gets to choose. Many Black immigrants say they're steered into areas with poor schools, far from hospitals, and disconnected from steady jobs. Not because they don't want better, but because the better places always seem to come with doors that never fully open. It's not rare for a Black immigrant family to be turned down for a rental, even with solid finances, simply because their last name doesn't sound familiar. Others get trapped in dilapidated apartments with broken windows, moldy ceilings, and landlords who disappear the moment something goes wrong. These details, no heating, cracked stairs, windows that won't shut, might seem like everyday inconveniences until a winter night in the Bronx turns them fatal. 19 lives lost. Most of them, Black immigrants. Because fire alarms didn't work and no one cared enough to fix them. Many Black immigrants say they're stuck between two impossible choices: accept the poor conditions they're offered or risk applying to places where they already know they'll be denied. It's a false choice, where the outcome always seems pre-written. And it's not just about walls and roofs, it's about separation of spirit. These neighborhoods lack diversity, connection, and a sense of belonging. Black immigrants live there like long-term guests, visible but not truly seen, not neighbors. Just temporary residents, wedged into the system's blind spots. If the American dream has a shape, it starts with a roof over your head. But when that roof stays out of reach, not because of laziness or failure, but because of invisible barriers stacked high and quiet, then maybe it's not just the buildings that need repair, but the very definition of what it means to be allowed to live. 8. Precarious immigration status. There are nights when people don't dare sleep too deeply. Because just one unexpected knock at the door before dawn, and everything can vanish. No hearing, no warning. Just one fragile immigration status is enough to cut the dream short with a one-way ticket back, no matter how many years have been lived, contributed, or rooted here. Many Black immigrants say they live in a state of suspension, not quite undocumented, but never secure. Those with refugee visas, temporary humanitarian status, or no valid documents all know the same truth. No one protects you when the papers you hold offer no promise for tomorrow. The recent termination of temporary protected status for Haiti is just one chapter in a long string of quiet but devastating policy shifts. Hundreds of thousands who were once allowed to stay now find themselves told, "You no longer belong." No, it's not rare for Black immigrants to be deported after years of legal presence simply because a permit expired during a bureaucratic delay. Many are detained, placed in solitary confinement, with no legal counsel and no family informed. These are not clerical mistakes, they're symptoms of a system that chooses to tighten first around those least able to fight back. And while the national conversation turns to restoring border order, the lived reality is that Black immigrants are swept into enforcement raids faster, harder, and more quietly than most. Not because they're the majority, but because they're the easiest to overlook. In debates about immigration reform, the question of who gets to stay often comes with a silent ranking, and Blackness rarely sits near the top. It's not just about the risk of deportation. It's about being exploited at work, denied health care, and excluded from basic services, all because a piece of paper says your presence is not authorized. But how can that paper define legitimacy when the system is designed to make legitimacy nearly unreachable? If the American dream is a road, then Black immigrants are asked to walk it barefoot while others get shoes. And every time the laws shift, the road gets rougher, not to push them out, but to wear them down until they collapse on their own. 9. Credential recognition gaps. Some diplomas are folded carefully and tucked away, not because they've lost value, but because here, no one asks to see them. A doctor who once saved hundreds of lives in Accra, an engineer who oversaw infrastructure in Lagos, a literature professor who lectured at a university in Nairobi. But in America, they learn to wait quietly for food delivery shifts, provide bedside care without a license, or navigate GPS routes for rideshare passengers instead of leading, teaching, or healing the way they once did. Many Black immigrants share that what's denied isn't just a job, it's the recognition of professional identity. As if the years of study, experience, and impact back home were somehow too dim to be seen in the eyes of American employers. It's not uncommon to hear of a physician licensed in 3 other countries now working sanitation shifts in a hospital, not because they lack skill, but because the system demands they prove it all over again. And for Black immigrants, that process always seems to stretch longer, with more roadblocks than reason can explain. The reality is that this brain waste is not just a personal tragedy, it's a societal failure. Billions in potential are left behind closed doors, not because there's no need, but because the mechanisms of recognition move slowly, especially for the ones who can't afford to wait. People talk about shortages in doctors, teachers, engineers, while letting those who could fill the gaps languish in roles far beneath their ability. underpaid, and invisible. Many describe the sting of every rejection that cites insufficient credentials as another quiet fracture in their sense of self. It's a subtle wound that doesn't bleed, but accumulates. And when a job becomes just a means of survival, not a path for growth, that so-called career dream starts to feel like a luxury. While advocacy groups are doing the work: career coaching, credential reform, licensing access, the question remains: why must some prove they're twice as good just to be seen as barely enough? The American dream should never require people to erase where they've come from just to be accepted where they've landed. But for many Black immigrants, the price of entry into the professional world seems to be silence about a past that once made them proud. 10. Mental health strain and burnout. There are wounds that don't bleed, but linger like a dull ringing in your head after a long flight, unclear where they started, but impossible to shake. That's what many Black immigrants carry day after day. An exhaustion without a name, a heaviness without shape, but one that weighs down both mind and body. Many Black immigrants say the toll isn't just in the long hours or the low wages, it's in the stares they get on public transport, the questions behind every job application, the way silence is interpreted as guilt. Each time they apply for work, they wonder if their name will be skipped over. Each time they board a bus, they can feel eyes trailing them. And every time the news mentions mass deportations, their chest tightens even if their papers are still valid. It's not uncommon to hear of Black immigrants working 2 or 3 jobs at once, supporting families both here and back home. But what often goes unseen is the body wearing down underneath the surface, the mind stretched thin by unspoken fears. Not because they're weak, but because they're never allowed to be. The reality is that conditions like depression, anxiety, and even PTSD are quietly rising among Black immigrant communities, but few seek help. Because seeking help means speaking out. And speaking out means confronting the fear that someone might say you're not strong enough, not good enough, or worse, not worth keeping here. It's not that Black immigrants don't need mental health support, it's that they've never seen a system that listens in a language they truly understand. Therapists rarely come from their cultural background. Programs rarely reach their neighborhoods. And the sense that this isn't for me pushes them back while silent stress creeps in further. When people are only told to try harder but never asked, how tired are you really? Mental health becomes a luxury. And the American dream, rather than a place to finally breathe, becomes a place where you hold your breath even tighter and never dare to fall. And those are the 10 signs that the American dream is quietly unraveling beneath the feet of Black immigrants. Each experience may be different, but what we've just explored isn't a string of isolated cases. It's the hidden layer of a system that demands to be seen clearly, understood deeply, and challenged meaningfully. This video isn't here to spread despair or crush hope. On the contrary, it's an invitation to recognize the truth so our communities can prepare better, speak louder, and rebuild the dream in a way that's truly just for everyone. If this video helped you, moved you, or opened your eyes in some way, don't forget to like and subscribe to BLK Lens for more stories that matter. And if you or someone you know has lived through similar experiences, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. We're always listening. Thanks for staying with us until the end. And as always, stay strong, stay safe, and keep dreaming with your eyes wide open.